Hi everyone, Jessica here, and thank you so much for watching today's video. So the card we're going to be creating today is going to have a curved bouncy front to it, but it's going to fit in a regular sized envelope because it will lie down flat. So we're going to start off by creating a frame. So I've got this cling background stamp from Simon Says Stamp that I bought a long time ago. I don't think this really had a name. It was kind of a center heart cutout, I think. And I'm going to stamp this onto some watercolor cardstock because we're going to do a little bit of painting with some distress inks. So because this is a watercolor cardstock, I do stamp this quite a few times just to make sure that I get a really great impression. For that, I'm using some Versafine Onyx black ink because I'm also going to do a little bit of heat embossing as well, just to make sure that we've got some nice little pockets and like little walls that the heat embossing will create. So then when we put our colors of distress ink on the paper, it's not going to all just kind of come together too much to create sort of one color essentially. So I've got some clear embossing powder here. I'm just pouring it all over the background, and then I am going to heat set that. So this card didn't quite turn out exactly how I wanted it to. I wanted the whole of the front to spring forward in a very even way, but as it turned out, the way that I created it, it created this really lovely curve, and I thought it was such an easy way to create that kind of curved look on the card, and I really loved it, so I left it as it was. But I am planning to kind of recreate the card how I wanted it to be, potentially as an Easter card, because I do have a couple of ideas for that. So if you aren't subscribed, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you don't miss out on when I upload that video, because it'll probably be in a week or two now. So I've just melted this whole background. I left it to one side just to cool down before we start working on it. And then I brought in my glass mat. So this is the Tim Holtz glass mat. I have the left-handed version because I am left-handed. I don't use my glass mat in my videos all that often because it does mess with the lighting a little bit, but this was during the day when I was filming it. So thankfully, it seems to have stayed nice and bright. So we're going to bring in purples. So we're basically having a purple colour palette for this. And I think I brought in 4 colours. We had milled lavender, Victorian velvet, I think it was wilted violet, and villainous potion. And what I've done is taken a big brush. I've taken quite a bit of water and I'm really saturating this cardstock just for my first layer or two, but we are going to dry this off and kind of add some more layers onto it. So I'm not really too fussed of how this looks because again we're going to try and build up those layers nicely. So you can see sort of that lighter colour is the Victorian velvet, which I thought was really pretty. The milled lavender didn't really come through, and of course then we added the wilted violet, villainous potion, that did deepen it up a little bit. Oh, actually, I might have had seedless preserve in there as well, which I think is that second row, the one on the right. So I'm literally just taking some water on my brush, just dipping it into the colours that I've smushed onto the glass mat, and then I'm literally just kind of painting it together. You can see we've still got a lot of empty spaces, so I was just going for a real base layer here, and we're going to kind of adapt and add to it as much as possible. So letting this dry, obviously it took a minute or two because it was saturated quite heavily with water, of course, at the start. But yeah, just going back in, kind of filling those gaps. I didn't want it to be kind of too purpley. I wanted to get that little bit of pink in there as well. So I'm just kind of really painting with it. You could do a bit of ink smushing here if you're not too worried about what the finished product is going to kind of look like. But I didn't want it to turn into kind of just one shade of pink or purple. I really wanted to have a little bit more control with it. So I'm not being too perfect, but yeah, I wanted to kind of get that nice variation of colours and sort of mixing some of these colours together, obviously, to create new colours. I tried to bring in a lot more of that Victorian velvet colour because, again, I thought that lightened it quite nicely. But with those deeper purples, you know, obviously it did kind of compete with it a little bit. What I would say is when you are heat setting, so you can see that when I'm sort of happy with that particular layer, then I am kind of drying it off a little bit and then coming back in again. But because we have heat embossed this, you want to be careful that you don't burn your heat embossing. So I am kind of moving it around. I do try to not have too many big pools of water where I'm going to kind of have it concentrated, you know, in a couple of particular areas. So do just keep that in mind. I wanted to add a little bit of a shimmer. I thought, well, you know, since we're kind of playing with this as much as possible. I brought in some Tonic Studio Nuvo powder. So this one was the Luna something, I think it was, or the Velvet Violet, I can't remember what the name is, but this is like the lilac-y type of one, and it has basically purple, quite a bright pink and quite a bright blue in here. So because I didn't really want to introduce those kind of colours and that bright colour as well, I did kind of, again, move it around after I'd spritzed it with water. I moved it around with my paintbrush just to kind of get it to mix in there a little better. And you can go as far with this as you want. I was quite happy with how this looked, so I'm going to take it off my glass mat. I'm going to blast it again with the heat tool. Again, you can see I'm just moving all around to make sure that I don't kind of concentrate too much on one area where we do obviously have that heat embossing. And then I'm going to leave this to dry. I'm going to clean up my mat, get rid of my glass mat, and then we can sort of get started in creating our front. So I'm essentially creating a frame here. If you have a stamp and die which kind of creates that frame, you could use this maybe one that cuts out the center. That would be great. I'm just taking some basic dies here. The card size, I want to say, was a 5.5 inch card, I think. So I went through my stash and through my nesting dies. I've picked out the Scalloped squares in the Creative Craft products, and then we're also going to use the inverted scallops as well. So we've got this size here, which is in the scallops. That's going to just die cut our frame, and this fits really nicely onto the card. You've got a small white gap, but again, once the card is kind of presented, when it's stood up, then it is going to bounce forward at us. And then I decided to use the inverted scallops to die cut the center. So again, creating kind of a frame here. If you've got lots of images and you wanted to put them all together, do a little bit of masking, you could create a frame that way, and I think that would be really beautiful. I love the inverted scallops because it leaves the scallops in your cardstock, so the center essentially becomes the waste, and it just adds a really nice finish to the card. But again, it really kind of depends if you're using the center bit that you're die cutting or whether you're using the outer piece as to whether you really want to use a die like this. So I'm just going to run that through my die cutter machine, and then we do have our frame piece, which you can see here. So I'm carefully going to take the tape off the center because we are going to cut out the heart from the middle, and we're going to put that into the center of our square that we've die cut out. So you can see how this fits really snugly on here, and this does remind me of something from kind of the 80s, I think, just with the colors and then those patterns as well. So you can see I'm just trimming out this heart. Again, we have taken the time to color the inside of this, so we may as well use it on our card. So you can see the card just there, how again that fits on the card itself. So again, really, really snug on there, but yeah, it does create something lovely. So the way we're going to create this curved sort of sprung front is we're going to add some springs, if you like. So I've cut 2 pieces of white cardstock, and this is 4 inches by 1.5 inches. And I score then at 1/2 inch and 1 inch. And by having then the sort of 3 pieces, and I'm just going to fold these in a concertina fold. By having the 3 pieces like this is then what gives it that curve. If you want to have the whole front of it to spring forward in a even way, like I was talking about, then I would recommend that you have 4 of these. So I haven't tried it, but I'm pretty sure it'll be 4 or 5 to bring it forward. So because we're scoring at 1/2 inch, so it is going to be 1/2 inch wide, then just add an extra 1/2 inch or 2 extra 1/2 inches for these springs. So again, I'm going to do that in another video because I haven't actually tested it, I'll be honest with you. I'm not 100% sure, but we will see in that next video exactly how to create that. But again, I really actually loved how this turned out. You've seen that I glued them just one each side, so you don't need a top or a bottom. I literally just did one on each side of it and just glued it down with some glue. So I decided then to fill in the center. So I just took a piece of white card and we're using that Victorian velvet because we had a lot of purple on that background. I wanted to kind of bring out that light pink color. So I'm just ink blending all over this and I'm going to trim it down. And I believe it was 3.5 by 3.5 inches that I trimmed this to. When it is sort of sprung forward and you look down it, you can see sort of past this square and you can see it into the white sections. If you don't want to see that, and maybe what I would do next time is I would have a full matten layer. You might not see it, you might not see all of it kind of under that frame because it is nice and thick, but what I would suggest then is when you're looking through the side, when it's up, you can't see any of that white card base underneath. So that would be my recommendation if I was to change this particular card again. So I'm just going to glue that into the center of our card. I'm going to add some glue onto the back of our springs, as you can see here. And I made sure to mirror how I had glued these springs down. And I'm just going to slow this down here so you can really see how this is going to look. I'm using my bone folder to make sure it's really well adhered, but you can see there when it lifts up, you can see how you have that lovely curve in the middle section, but it's just sprung forward. You've got that lovely little bit of shadow on the inside, but you can see the white of the card, as I said. But again, this will then lie flat. It stands up really nicely, but it will go into a regular sized envelope. So I'm going to just glue that heart into the center. And again, I wanted then to have the frame stand forward. And this is kind of an altered like tunnel card kind of, that you would see with all the different layers. If you just want that like one layer, this is a really great option. So for the sentiment, just to finish this card off, so I recently got, which I'm planning to do a video on, is the PinkFresh Studio Premium Magazine from Craft Stash. So I will leave a link to that in the description box down below. There's a happy birthday die set here that you can see, and this is the word and the shadow die. So I cut the shadow from black and the words from white, and I'm just gluing those together. It also came with a floral stamp and then also a layering stencil set as well, which I've used once to make a sympathy card, and it was so beautiful. So the rest of the card is pretty much very simple. We're going to add our sentiment to the center of this card around that love heart, just with a little bit of foam, just to kind of lift that bit up. And then we're going to add some Nuvo drops. So again, a very kind of a simple card, but I really love how this turned out. Again, just something different, but so easy. You don't have to create, a box envelope. You don't have to create any sort of bouncy envelope, anything like that. It will lie flat into a regular envelope, but when it comes up, it just springs forward, which I think is great. It springs forward. It has that lovely curve in it for just something a little bit different. And now, so again, I'm going to add just some Nuvo drops, just a couple in the center, just to finish that off. But I really love the card. Let me know what you guys think. Again, I am planning to do another version, like I said, an Easter version, hopefully where we can get the whole thing to spring forward, but you can see how that is going to lie flat, and you can see then that beautiful curve. So that's going to be it for today's video. So again, thank you very much for stopping by and watching this video. If you liked it, please give this video a thumbs up. That's going to be it for today. Thanks very much for watching, and happy crafting.